Okay, so this candidate that we are talking about today was looking for a senior business development role, specifically in the AdTech, MarTech space. Definitely a lot of good experience in that regard, good sales experience as presented by the resume, and definitely a very interesting mock interview with a lot of really good content that came out of it. Okay, so the focus of this question is around the trying to assess the candidate's ability to run complex deals, their ability to dive deep, get into the details. In this specific question, we're trying to gauge the level of experience of the candidate, whether or not they were going to be the kind of person who could report directly to a VP, or whether they need to have a skip level manager between them and a VP, just trying to assess where they are and where they would be inside of an organization. And therefore, our expectation is to hear a clear focus on customer needs and outcomes and dollars and structure, complexity, etc. And so let's see how they did.
One last thing as we're coming up on time. One of the most difficult challenges for a salesperson or anyone in BD is having to make fast decisions, right? You're up against timeline with imperfect information.
Yep.
That's, happens all the time. It's terrible. Pick one where you've had just, you've got a short deadline. Maybe there's a competitor in trying to, a sales process that you got invited too late. Imperfect information. What was the issue? How'd you handle it?
Yeah, I had a client, a small grocer in the Northeast.
This is with Cardlytics?
This is at Cardlytics.
Okay.
I had a small grocer up there who I had a great relationship with. She called me one day and said, well, let me back up. I had been in there recently and expressed to her that we could help her with several different more facets of her business. And she said, okay, I'll take that into consideration. About a week and a half later, she called me one morning and said, regarding what we were speaking about when you were here, my company is now forecasting a shortfall of our digital line of business, essentially the pick up at the window business.
Yep.
Is there a way, you mentioned, but is there a way you can help me with that? And I said, yes, there is. And what I had been speaking about was not a product that had been fully baked yet at Cardlytics. She said, I need to know today. So I then had about 8 hours to figure out with my team at Cardlytics, the product team, et cetera, if there was a way to do this. The problem that we were facing was that all of Cardlytics pricing is based on forecasting. And this was a new product for that grocer, meaning that they didn't have a pickup. They didn't have pickup business for us to model off of. So we had to model off of other similar grocers, which is a lot of steps removed from actuality.
Yep.
So I had to quickly convince the AM's team again to do this modeling and then to allow it and then to have the budget open-ended. What we usually do is say, this is going to cost you, say, $100,000 or $200,000, and we on 10% on either side of that is what your bill will be. But the client agreed quickly to say, yes, it'll be open-ended. We'll pay whatever you can get, because her number that she needed to reach was so much higher than we would ever get to. And then within Cardlytics,
explain that. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So she was experiencing, these are numbers that are generally made up,
Sure.
say a $3.5 million shortfall on pickup window business for the rest of the year. So, and this was a new product. So she called me and said, hey, they forecasted this incorrectly. We now need to make this number. So, we looked at we knew that it was a new product that she would never, based on their business in store, they would never get to that number. So, but she said, do anything you can to help us. So I had to then convince my team to not give them a final projection number of what that budget would be and just keep it open-ended and just say we're going to bill them for whatever business comes in. We're not going to do a projection just at first. We'll do the projections after we get the data, and we'll do it on an ongoing basis, but there won't be one to start the campaign. And all this happened within about 6 hours of the daytime. I got back to her about 5 o'clock that day after settling it with, the product team, the projection team, everyone that I worked with. Everyone was okay with it, nervous, and it was unusual, but everyone thought, okay, we'll do this for the first month and 2 months, and then it'll get into routine and we'll be able to project better. But they were okay as long as the client was okay. We put a little bit of verbiage in the contract to make sure that that was listed very specifically.
Yep.
And legal was okay with it, and we went through with the contract.
And what was the result for her business?
It was just as we had all forecasted. It was very slow to start with. The second month increased quite a bit. After that, I actually left the company, so I don't know what the end of the curve looks like, but the increases were, substantial, 25%, I think, month over month, which is, as the popularity of curbside increases and them offering this as a new product, there'd be sort of a lot of interest built up, but nascent activity it's at the start and more as word gets out.
There's a lot to love about this answer. Overall, look, rush jobs suck. Customers are going to call you and say, need to get this done. You need to move fast. I don't care what your problems are. So the candidate did a really good job of kind of setting that up and creating a sense of urgency in the interview around how critical this was and how important it was to get done, because it was a huge customer and they needed something that was important to them, and they needed to move fast, and they needed to buy, I believe in this case, was the end of the day. And so that is, that's important. Two, there was no mention of a decision chain in terms of how the decisioning was made, which leads me to believe that as an interviewer, conclude that this specific candidate was pretty highly autonomous and didn't require a lot of calling an air support to get things done, which it kind of has the side benefit of demonstrating a sense of earned trust within their organization, or operating at a higher level than maybe their background or experience would necessarily communicate. So that was awesome. And finally, in this case, kind of common feedback that was given to this candidate throughout the feedback session was, hey, come back, make sure that you're prepared in your real interviews with meaty metrics and things you can talk about without necessarily giving away proprietary information. But in this answer, they actually gave some metrics, and they talked about specific outcomes in an unsolicited way. So maybe they had kind of picked up along the way that they kept getting probed for numbers, and in this case, they finally chose to share one. And so that's good. I would say in this case, it's picking up. The growth rate really is not wasn't necessarily proprietary. Totally fine, but it was definitely demonstrating the data and the diving deep as a kind of pull that in leadership principle. Let me demonstrate this extra thing on top of what you were looking for, which is my bias for action. So overall, there was a lot to like about this answer. All right, so how did the candidate do with regard to bias for action? I'm going to read the feedback that would have been given in the candidate assessment. And it's important to understand that it really wasn't touched on in this interview, with the notable exception of the instance of the grocer in the Northeast. So no answers provided by the candidate gave any cause to believe that they do not have a bias for action. Opportunities to demonstrate this would be any answers which are walking through a self-initiated deal or relationship, or working through a notable or noted problem that was outside of the measurable results within a deal relationship, and taking course corrective action to the benefit of the customer or the company. Important that you note their customer first, company second. If those examples exist from the employment history, candidate should prepare the example and find a way to work it into an answer. Typical questions where appropriate would be something like, tell me about a time when you went above and beyond for a relationship or for a customer. By electing to use an example that focuses on something candidate self-started or initiated, candidate can take a question that is focusing on customer obsession and adding in a layer of bias for action, thus standing out as a candidate.